At our mother's memorial lunch, in a private room at a restaurant with about 30 people in it, my sister said, not quietly, that there was money missing and that everyone should be asking me about it. I was standing near the drinks table. I had a plate in my hand with a piece of somebody's coffee cake on it that I had not started eating. 30 people. Half of them stopped talking. The other half did the thing where they keep talking louder. I put the plate down. I said, "This isn't the day, Deb." She said, "It's never the day with you." And that was the beginning of 3 years, though I didn't know it standing there. I thought it was a bad afternoon. My name is Gene Marchetti. I'm 58 years old. I've spent 31 years as a bridge inspector for the state, structural evaluation, load rating, the reports that determine what a bridge is allowed to carry. Before I tell you why I didn't defend myself, do me one small kindness. If you've ever let something untrue stand about you, because correcting it would have cost somebody else more than it cost you, tap subscribe. It's free. And stay to the end, because there's a question at the bottom of this I still turn over. Here's what my sister believed, and I want to lay it out fairly, because from where she was standing it added up. Our mother died with about $41,000 in her accounts. Deb had been expecting something closer to 110. She had a reason for that number. Our mother had told her, maybe 4 years before she died, that she had about 110 put away. That was true when she said it. Deb also knew that I had handled our mother's finances for the last 6 years of her life. Power of attorney, bill paying, the accounts. Not because I wanted it, because I live 11 minutes away and Deb lived in Arizona. So, a woman with $110,000, 6 years of her son having complete access to it, and $41,000 at the end. Her brother drives a decent truck. Her brother put a new roof on his house in that window. You don't have to be a bad person to reach a conclusion from those facts. You have to be missing one piece of information, and Deb was missing it. And the reason she was missing it is that I never gave it to her. Because the $69,000 went to Deb, not to her directly, and not in a way she ever saw as a number. In 2016, my sister's husband had a business fail, a specialty contracting outfit, 11 employees at its best, and it failed the bad way, with personal guarantees on the debt and a creditor who was not interested in a payment plan. They were about 11 weeks from losing the house. Deb called our mother. Not me. Our mother. I want to be fair about that. She called our mother because our mother was the person you called, and because there is a specific humiliation in asking your brother, and because at that point Deb and I were fine, but not close in the way that would let you make that call. And our mother did what our mother did, which was write checks. Over about 14 months, she covered the mortgage arrears, then a settlement to the largest creditor, and then a second, smaller round 2 years after that when it flared back up. $69,000. I know the number to the dollar because I was the one processing the transfers. By 2016, I had the power of attorney, and I was doing all the account work, and every one of those movements came across my desk. The first time I saw one, I called her. I asked her what was going on. She told me, straight out, no defensiveness. This is what it's for. This is why I saved it. I do it for you. Then she asked me for something. She asked me never to tell anyone. Not the wider family. Not Deb's kids. And most of all, she was very clear about this part. Never Deb, in any way Deb would have to acknowledge out loud. She put it like this. She took it as help. If it ever gets counted, it turns into a debt. I've thought about that sentence for a decade. It's the most sophisticated thing my mother ever said to me. And she said it with a crossword in her lap and a pen in her hand, and she went back to the crossword afterward. So I said okay. And I want to be honest about what I understood myself to be agreeing to, which was almost nothing. I said okay in 2016 the way you say okay to a small favor. Don't mention it, sure, fine. I did not understand I was accepting a permanent position. Nobody hands you the job description on those. If you're still with me, tap subscribe, because here's what 3 years of that position looked like. Deb told people, not everyone at once. It moved the way these things move through phone calls and side conversations and somebody mentioning it to somebody at a christening, and it arrived at me in pieces over about 18 months. And Aunt stopped returning my calls. Not dramatically. She just became a person who was always about to call me back. A cousin I'd been close to since we were 9 got noticeably careful with me at a wedding. We talked for 6 or 7 minutes about parking, and the whole time I could see him working around something, the way you talk to a man you've heard a thing about and haven't decided on. Then there was Ilsa, my mother's oldest friend. She has known me since I was in a stroller, and she taught me to swim in 1974. At a church function, she told me she hoped I'd make it right. I asked her what she meant. She patted my arm. She did not answer as she walked away. That pat is one of the 4 or 5 worst things that has ever happened to me. And my own daughter asked me about it. She was 24. She came over on a Sunday and sat in my kitchen and said Aunt Deb had said something at Thanksgiving and she wanted to hear it from me. She asked in a way that made 2 things clear, that she did not believe it and that she needed me to say the words out loud anyway. I said, I did not take anything from your grandmother. She said, okay. And then she said the thing that took an actual piece out of me. She said, then why won't you fight it? I did not have an answer for her that I could say. I said something about not wanting to make it bigger, and she looked at me for a second and let it go, and I have thought about that look a great deal since. Let me tell you the 3 or 4 times I nearly broke it. The first was about 6 months in. I had the statements. I had the transfer records, the cashier's check stubs, all of it, because I kept everything the way you keep everything when you're handling somebody else's money. I sat on my kitchen table one night and built a folder. Dates, amounts, the whole trail, in order, the way I'd assemble an inspection report. I addressed an envelope to Deb's house in Arizona, and I walked it out to the mailbox at the end of my driveway. I stood there about 10 minutes. It was February, and I did not have a coat on, and I stood there long enough to get cold. Then I came back inside and put it in a drawer, and it is still in that drawer. The second was at that wedding with my cousin, when I could see the calculation happening behind his face while he talked to me about parking. The third was Ilsa at the church function, because that one made me angry in a way the others hadn't. A woman who'd known me 45 years had accepted, without asking me a single question, that I was the kind of man who empties his mother's accounts. I got as far as opening my mouth, and I thought about what the sentence would actually be. No, Ilse. My mother gave $69,000 to Deb because Deb's husband ran a business into the ground, and they were about to lose their house. And I'd be right. And then Ilse would know it, which means everybody in that church would know it inside a month. And Deb's kids would know it, and Deb would know that everyone knew. My mother spent $69,000 to keep a specific kind of shame off her daughter, and I'd have undone it in a sentence to defend myself. Here's the thing I kept landing on every time at the mailbox and at the wedding and at the church. The cost of the accusation was that some people thought less of me. That's real. I'm not going to minimize it because I lived in it for 3 years and it changes how you walk into a room. But it's bounded. It's a reputation among about 15 people, most of whom I see twice a year. The cost of the correction was different in kind. It wasn't that Deb would look bad. It's that she'd be permanently and publicly reduced inside her own family, in front of her own children, over a thing that happened when her husband's business failed and she was frightened. And on top of that, she'd have to know that her mother had told me, and not her, that the 2 of us had been managing her, that her brother had been carrying it in the room the entire time she was talking about him. That's not 1 humiliation. That's 3 stacked, and they'd land on a woman who is not built for them. Those are not the same size. I did the arithmetic maybe 40 times over 3 years, and it came out the same way every time, and I never once got a different answer no matter how angry I was when I ran it. I'm not telling you that to sound noble about it. There's a version of this where I was also partly avoiding a fight, where the silence was principle and cowardice wearing the same coat, and I have never been fully able to get the two of them apart. A man who doesn't like confrontation and has a good reason not to confront somebody is a man who will never find out which one he was obeying. Now here's how it ended, and it wasn't me. 3 years on, Deb and her husband were doing better, and she started getting her own affairs in order. Part of that was pulling her financial history. She was working with somebody on a debt restructure, and that meant getting records from 2016 through 2019. The creditor settlement from 2017 was paid by cashier's check. Our mother's name was on it. She called me at 11 at night, Arizona time, which is 1 in the morning where I am. I picked up on the second ring because a call at that hour from Deb was going to be one of two things. She said, "Why is Mom's name on this?" And I told her, all of it at 1 in the morning, sitting on the edge of my bed. The 14 months. The second round. The number. What her mother had asked me to do, and the exact sentence she'd used about it turning into a debt. Deb did not say anything for a long time. Long enough that I said her name to check. Then she said, 3 years, Gene. And I said, yeah. She said, why didn't you just tell me? I said, because she asked me not to, and because you'd have had to know that she knew. She hung up. Not angrily. She said she needed to go, and she went, and I sat on the edge of my bed at 1:30 in the morning for a while afterward, not doing anything in particular. She called back 4 days later, and we talked for 2 hours, and that conversation is not something I'm going to lay out for the internet. She'd earned some privacy on it by then, and I'm not going to spend it. I'll tell you 2 things that came out of it. The first is that she wasn't only angry at herself, and she wasn't only angry at me. She was angry at our mother, for the arrangement, for putting it on me, for deciding on Deb's behalf what Deb could handle. And she has a point that I've never been able to fully argue with. The second is that she asked whether I wanted her to tell people. To go back to the aunt and the cousin and Ilsa and correct it. And I said no. She asked why, and I said because it's 3 years old and it'd be a second conversation about the same thing, and it would cost you more than it gets me. She said, and she was crying, which Deb does not do, "You're still doing it." And she was right. I hadn't noticed I was doing it. 3 years of a habit, and it had gotten into the wiring. Somebody offers to set the record straight, and my first instinct is still to run the arithmetic on what it costs her. In the end, she told a few of them anyway. Not a campaign, nothing organized. She called Ilsa. She called our cousin. She said she had been wrong, and she didn't dress it up. That was hers to do, and I stayed out of it entirely. And I have not asked either of them about it since, and I'm not going to. I've spent 31 years rating bridges, determining in writing what a structure is permitted to carry. And here's the only thing I actually know. Every bridge has a posted load limit, and every bridge can carry considerably more than the posted number. Sometimes double. The posting isn't the failure point. It's the failure point with a safety factor pulled out of it, because you rate for the worst case, not the average day. And here's what's true about all of it. Nobody driving across ever knows. There's a sign with a number on it. What the structure is actually holding on a Tuesday with a fully loaded truck on the center span is not information that gets shared with anybody. The bridge does not communicate about its capacity. It just holds or it doesn't. I've spent my whole career determining what things can carry without announcing it. And it turns out that's not a metaphor I chose. It's the same instinct that put me at that mailbox for 10 minutes and walked me back inside. My mother rated me. That's what she did in 2016 with a crossword in her lap. She looked at her 2 children and made a judgment about which one could carry $69,000 worth of silence. And she was right, and she never asked me whether I wanted to be the one who could. That's the thing about being the strong one in a family. Nobody offers it to you. It gets assigned based on an assessment somebody else made, and the assessment is usually correct, which is exactly what makes it hard to put down. I held 3 years, and I held, and I'd hold again. I want to be clear about that because the version of this where I stand here regretting it isn't honest. Given the same two numbers, I run the same arithmetic, and I get the same answer. But there's a cost to being the structure that nobody inspects, and the cost is not the load. The load I could take. The cost is that when you're the one who holds, people stop asking whether you're all right, because holding is what you do, and nobody checks on a thing that's holding. For 3 years, I was the strongest thing in that family, and the only person who knew it was a woman who died. So here's my question, and I want it honest. I let an untrue thing about me stand for 3 years to protect my sister from shame she didn't know she was being protected from. She never asked for that. She'd never have agreed to it if I'd asked her. I made the decision unilaterally, the same way our mother made it about me. I decided what someone else could handle, and I never gave them a say in it. So did I do the same thing to Deb that my mother did to me? And if I did, is that a reason not to have done it? Tell me down in the comments. I've argued both sides, and I've never landed. If this meant something to you, subscribe and hit like. And if there's somebody in your family everyone has decided about, check whether they've been given the chance to explain or just the opportunity to deny it. Those are different, and only one of them is a question. I'll see you next time. A note before you go. This story is a work of fiction, written and dramatized for entertainment. The names, characters, and events are invented, and any resemblance to real people or events is purely coincidental. But if its lesson stayed with you, that the posted limit is never what a thing is actually carrying and nobody crossing ever knows, then it did its job. We'll see you in the next one.